Welcome to the Heartland Journal's Tennessee podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe. Hit it now while you're thinking about it, and pass it around. We only grow with your help, and thanks for doing it. On this show, we are focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with a very special guest, Monty Fritts. Monty Fritts is a Republican, is a member of the Tennessee House of Representatives, representing District 32, Kingston, part of Loudoun and Roane counties. He assumed office on November 8th, 2022. His current term ends on November 3rd, 2026. Monty was born in Rockwood, Tennessee, earned a BS in Chemistry Business from Liberty University, an MA in Theological Studies from Liberty University, and an MBA from the University of Tennessee in 2011. His career experience includes working as a realtor with Covenant Broker Real Estate LLC, a business development executive with Omega Technical Services, and a nuclear manufacturing consultant. Fritts has been affiliated with the Society of the 1st Infantry Division of the Tennessee Firearms Association. He won his first election in a 5-man Republican primary race in 2022 by 34% and went on to beat the Democrats 77-23. Likely because of that landslide, he ran unopposed in 2024 for his second term in the 114th General Assembly. Fritts is running for re-election to the Tennessee House of Representatives to represent District 32 again and declared candidacy for the 2026 election. He is Vice Chairperson, Naming and Designation Committee, Vice Chairperson, Joint Education, Health, and General Welfare Committee, member of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, member of Government Operations Committee, member Immigration Committee of Extraordinary Session, member Joint Commerce, Labor, Transportation, and Agriculture. He's a member of Joint Judiciary and Government, and he is husband to Denise, father, grandfather, carpenter by trade, who enjoys working on antique autos and motorcycles, United States Army, Tennessee Army National Guard, 278 ACR, veteran war in Iraq, 2004 to 2005. Thank you for your service, sir. Member, First Baptist Church of Rockwood. He was kind enough to come for a visit with me in studio, even though Tennessee is not in session at the moment, to go over his 2 terms in office, including a few emergency sessions and what we can look forward to next session come January 2026, when we have an election year for new governor and what role he might take in that sure to be exciting campaign. Let's do this. Welcome back, everybody. Representative Monty Fritts, would you like to pray over this conversation before we get going so we don't get out of line with the Lord?
Be honored to, brother. Heavenly Father, we call upon you. Guide our words, our thoughts, guide mine, God. You know how broken I am. And I pray, God, that you would give us wisdom and discernment in all that we say and do, you that the name of Jesus be lifted up. We pray and ask for your hand of blessing on our state of Tennessee. We pray, God, that you would forgive us our sin, forgive me of mine, Lord God. Certainly my sin is enough to bring your judgment on this state. And I pray, God, that you'll bring about a spirit of repentance amongst your people here, that we'll turn from our wicked ways, God, and seek you, that you might heal this land that we love called Tennessee. And I pray that in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen, amen. Thank you. That was beautiful. Appreciate it. You grew up respecting Tennessee men like Davy Crockett, Andrew Jackson, Texas's Sam Houston, and Alvin York died right here in Nashville.
Yeah.
Tell us what you take inspiration from those folks when you're up in Nashville.
Yes, sir. Those and many others, in many cases, average men that may not have had expectations of doing the great things that they did. And they leaned in times of trial. Each one of those men you mentioned leaned in times of trial, and often leaned in something counter to what they would have preferred. Sergeant York certainly did not want to be drafted at 28, 29 years old. He had the thoughts about not wanting to take life. And yet he become the hero of that time period in that war, one of the many. We had a high per capita loss of men from Tennessee in World War I. I think we often forget how bloody it was. And if you read his journal, he spoke in words as if, what I've read, as if you would expect someone from Pell Mell, Tennessee to speak. Mm-hmm. I remember one of the entries, he talks about the boys being cut down like a machine cutting hay. And so just that fortitude, that courage, and that reliance upon a foundational truth, I think you see that in all those men that you mentioned. Certainly you see that in Houston. You see that in Crockett. And when he lost, he gained a distaste for politics due to different things. And, his famous line of, you can all go to hell, I'm going to Texas. Mm-hmm. Right?
I think Jackson had an air of that too.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you can pick out many others. You look across the state, I think of a man from Williamson County who was born a slave in 1847, joined the Army after the Civil War, and was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions in New Mexico on 2 different occasions, where he was leading men. And he's buried in a place of honor, I think, in Kansas now, but a Buffalo soldier. And, George Jordan, First Sergeant George Jordan. And so you look
history is almost forgotten. Polk.
Yes.
Yeah, the Tennessee man who fought on the border there too.
Yeah, and so you see that kind of courage. Well, I think today I would have a hard time understanding the challenges that George Jordan had when he joined the Army and became a Buffalo soldier. I was a cavalryman in the Army, and so that draws it near to my heart. But I mean, there's another Tennessean who, in the most unlikely of circumstances, the way he was born, and his name is revered amongst the very best of our nation's men.
These are the movies that need to be made. That's another story for another day. Men with Tennessee connections who defined home of the brave, men like your great-great-great-grandfather, I think I got that right, who fought for our freedom in the Revolutionary War. Was that great-great-ancestor John Fritts, Pennsylvania 2nd Regiment by chance?
No, I'm going to misquote his name. I wish I had prepped more for that. So the grandfather that's mentioned there, great, however many generations back, following the Battle of Kings Mountain, was killed by Tories. I understand there's a monument to him there in North Carolina. I hope it survived the flooding last year in Helene. I've not visited. That's on my bucket list, just to look and see the roots of the family. He was, I think, 2nd generation past our original Fritts that come in, Wooldridge, Frederick Fritts, and he come over on the ship Elizabeth left in 1738. The records that I have, he got to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1739, and then Fritz has moved into Virginia and North Carolina, and then eventually in Tennessee. The records that I have, the first Tennessean to come in, the first Fritz to become a Tennessean in Roane County, was in 1811, and that was up near the Clinch River in what we call Buttermilk Road today.
So you're a unicorn going all the way back to before unicorns roamed the earth, and they don't again. So you got some serious soil under those nails. Yeah. Okay. Well, you served in Iraq. Thank you for your service.
Yes, sir.
Did you have a long military family history since Frederick down to your father before you?
Not really. No. Not really. I'm sure there were other members, but if you look through the history, most of my family in the lineage family in Tennessee were Union soldiers, and most of the Fritz lineage family in North Carolina were Confederate soldiers. And they're all from the same branch, so I find that interesting.
Brother versus brother, for real.
Yes, absolutely. And the turmoil of that time, it was actually just something I grew up kind of wanting to do. And a little bit after high school, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have the name, and I hadn't planned to go to college at that time. So the Army and the National Guard was a good thing for me to do.
Gotcha. Tennessee is ranked 25th among states for its share of the veteran population, right in the middle there of the 50 states, 7.2% of the state's population. What do we do right, and what could we do better to attract more vets from South Carolina and Virginia, the big ones?
Well, you know, the Bible says, show me your treasure and I'll show you where your heart is, right? And so our budget, I think, is out of control in Tennessee. It's grown 59% in the last 6 years. That should concern every Tennessean. But while the budget has grown by 59%, twice the pace of the Consumer Price Index over that same period of time, by the way, our veterans budget, spending Tennessee dollars in veteran spending, has gone down. So that's a problem. I'll start with that first. We have a problem with that, and I think we can do better. We are one of the things we do well. General Baker, former General Baker, is the Department of Veteran Services. I think his organization and state government does a good job in servicing Tennesseans. And I think every time we get an opportunity to point someone to General Baker's group of people, Catherine Held and the folks that I work with there, it's usually a positive outcome for the veteran in just being heard and being helped. And I think that's a good thing for us.
That's a good thing. My old hometown of Washington and Oregon ranked dead last, by the way, 50 and 51. That's how bad it is. There's only 50 states, but D.C. is better at 47. So don't you think, what Obama said, 57 states. So at least, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But at least we're doing better than that, right? I mean, we got something going on, but we definitely could do a lot better. Do you think it has anything to do with the lack of Medicaid expansion, or just not related? There's just kind of seems to be the one big thing that Tennessee is constantly harped on by the left, is that we refuse to expand Medicaid, which others haven't either. But it also translates to veterans being somewhere in the middle of the pack of states. Do you think there's any correlation there?
I don't know that I could draw a correlation there. There's an independent spirit amongst Tennesseans, right? And even folks like yourself that move here, you're seeking to live out your independent spirit, right? Because your independent spirit might have been suppressed or oppressed a little bit in Washington State. And so I think that independent spirit sometimes is reluctant to ask for help. And I think one of the things I've learned is that our veterans need to reach out. You know, there was time we were having 22 per day that were taking their own lives, and that's somewhere in the 16, 17 range now. One is too many. I think one of the things that General Baker's group wanted to do was outreach into hospitals, nursing homes, and jails, because they're still veterans. And outreach is important, because that, you know, God says it's not good for man to be alone. And sometimes these men and women feel alone. And that transition, if they're a career soldier, you know, if they serve 20, 30, or even 40 years perhaps, that transition into a civilian life is a challenge. I don't know that the military does a good job of helping with that transition, right?
Right.
And you're accustomed, you're institutionalized to something of structure and order and strength. And sometimes you get away from that. And I think so there's a reluctance to ask, and the VA system is challenging to navigate. And I think that's one of the things our Department of Veteran Services does. I think we need to do more in that area. I heard something the other day, and I can't validate these numbers because I haven't looked it up yet, but that in the next 10 years, benefits for disabled veterans could reach the same cost as what our military budget is. Again, I just heard that number, or heard that statement, and looked at the numbers.
That budget is $1.7 trillion.
Yes. And so
that's because we have so many more veterans after all the many wars that we fought, like Iraq and the rest.
So I think here's one thing that I think we could do better, and that's something I'd co-sponsored, and it makes the rank nervous, and it pleases the file, if you could look at it that way. This defend the guard. We have become that which Eisenhower warned us about. The defense industrial complex, in Monty's humble opinion, drives us into wars. It shouldn't surprise us that the cost of caring for our men and women who have served is continuing to grow. We've been at war for 20 years, or we're at war for 20 years until this debacle of a withdrawal in Afghanistan, and still at some level. And we really need to get back to what our founders and framers, and we states need to push back. Our governors need to push back. Our general assemblies need to push back. Congress, you need to declare war. It should be an all-in thing. Doesn't mean that we should limit the president's ability to defend us or cut off an attack at all. But 20 years presence in Iraq and Afghanistan and Africa and other places that we have soldiers today, It's hard for me to justify that in my mind when I look at the Constitution and what it says. And I think that's something Tennessee could do much better. Stop sending our sons and daughters off to this hygienically challenged parts of the world to bleed, die, and if nothing else, for their eyes to see things that God never intended their eyes to lay upon. And it brings back a trauma with them. And that's going to cost us. There's a generational cost to that.
Didn't Lee just send a bunch of National Guardsmen like a week before Helene hit Eastern Tennessee and Western North Carolina? Like, what was that all about?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't get into the mind of Bill Lee and what he thinks and what he doesn't think. He just went over and visited. We have 700 in the Middle East right now. We're going to send another 700. There's another deployment coming. I'm hopeful that President Trump's going to stop some of that. We're sending these men and women, in many cases, we'll send them to some area that's benign, a Kuwait or something like that. But they find themselves in a combat zone, in an imminent hazard pay zone. And I hope that none of those 700, one of those groups that's over is from my town of birth right now. And I was there when they marched up through the streets singing the cadence of She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. And I'd never seen it from that perspective, Steve. And my wife would tell you, I had a hard time holding it together. Because you see these young men that they're willing to go. They have the heart of the soldier. God creates the warrior and the poet.
Yeah, we're the volunteers.
And that's right. And that you could see the heart of the warrior coming up through there. But you have to ask, what is the objective? Other than to spend our money and to perhaps shed our blood in those places and bring damage, long-lasting damage upon the human being. Because again, God didn't originally design us to look upon the things you have to see in a combat zone.
No, and if you build and design a gun, it's built to shoot. If you design a warrior and train them, they are built to fight.
That's right.
But if there's no one to fight, you got your David and Goliath type of situation. All right, so tell us about Kingston and Loudoun and Rohr counties. Your voters went for you in a landslide, 77%. What do they ask of you that you obviously deliver?
I think first, I work for a great group of people in Roane and Loudoun County. I've got most all of Roane County and the north half of Loudoun County. Loudoun County is the second fastest growing state our second fastest growing county in the state, and top 50, I think, in the nation. I mean, and good people. They like us being responsive. I have a great legislative assistant in Nashville. We try to get back with folks. We try to hear them. You can't fix every problem for folks, but you can listen, and we try to do that. We try to do some outreach, and I try to take on subjects that, unfortunately, many politicians are reluctant to take on because they're afraid they'll lose a vote, I think. That's my assessment. And we've tried not to do that. We've tried to just, if it seems like the right thing to do, we go for it and try to equip ourselves. God's given us victory in many of those things, and I think the people appreciate that there's a relevance.
And the numbers prove it out. When you talk to them about the General Assembly, do they feel Nashville is representing them as Tennesseans, or do they feel out of sync with the majority up there, even if happy with you, maybe not with the other 74 Republicans and 24 Democrats of the 99?
I think the well-informed resident in Roane County and Loudoun County is really upset with Nashville. I think the moderately informed is really upset with Nashville because Nashville is behaving like D.C. If back to the number on the budget, if in 6 years we're going to grow our budget by 59%, that's not small government. That's not limited government. That's not fiscal responsibility. And it infuriates most of the people that I speak with that we're putting dollars into corporate welfare type things or things that are outside the role of government, setting up a program that sounds good. $60 million this year's budget to provide for zero interest new construction starter home loans. Well, that sounds great when you think about it. You've got more dollars now chasing fewer products, homes, and we're going to create an inflationary impact. And so people that think through that, they're not crazy about their tax dollars being spent on it. And we still do things. I mention this, and folks kind of, sometimes the politicians kind of roll their eyes. But we're still charging that 4% state grocery tax. We should stop that. It's immoral. We sent $13 million this year, and I voted against the budget this year. I'm told that's the death sentence for a Republican. Okay, I say, but God, come on. It was wrong. And $13 million to the Commission for the Arts. Just under $3 million of that was for salaries. $10 million of that is to financially incentivize. And I love the arts. This is Nashville. We love the arts. Bristol loves the arts, music. Beale Street loves the arts. But is it the taxpayers' burden to finance that? Sure, we should be advocates for the arts and provide opportunities, right? But that doesn't mean we have to pay for it. And so to send $13 million to that when I've got a 72-year-old grandmother or great-grandmother in Roane County that has to decide between a bottle of Tylenol or a loaf of bread, it is immoral for us to continue to charge that 4% tax. And, we're required to have a balanced budget. We did that. We could balance
surplus
a $50 billion budget just as easily as we could balance a $59 billion budget.
More with less, absolutely. And that's why I've been advocating for a property tax cap. We're only one of 5 states that don't, all blue states except for some reason Kansas, but they've gotten pretty blue. But can't talk about that because it'll take up all the time.
Well, you're gonna see something from me on that this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We've asked legal to draft something, and as soon as I get it out, I'm going to put it out in the media.
I've got so much information on Prop 13 and the Supreme Court decision that it's legal and how it was basically passed in 1978 when I was 6, and it was the economic miracle that was California for all those many years. And the liberals wanted to repeal it day one, but they didn't allow it, and it did great. And guess who passed it? The super liberal father of Jerry Brown, Governor Brown, did that. So you can do it, Democrats and Republicans. It's a nonpartisan issue. I love you for it.
Yeah, now I'm not trying to pattern Prop 13 because I have some questions with that and some things I think it did harmful to California. But we do have an approach we're working through to get it within our constitutional bounds.
I would expect nothing less than Tennessee do it better and bigger.
We're going to try it
than they did. Okay.
We're gonna try it.
Well, so there's only 24 Democrats. We are called a supermajority. We're actually a triplex, meaning we have governor, AG, both houses, and Secretary of State, which is a trifecta. There are 23 Republican trifectas in the country, 15 Democrat trifectas in America. The news would call us deep red, but not all trifectas are alike. Do you agree the leadership runs things like a true Republican Party should, or do they cater more to the left-wing media that would do just as well in San Diego or Boston as they would do in Nashville or Memphis?
I would say C on the answer to your question rather than A or B. I would say that we do not behave like small government, constitutional Republicans. I already talked about the budget. I won't spend any more time on that. Gun rights. And I'll go to that, Steve, because I think it's the greatest of litmus tests about how a political figure views your rights. I think the Bill of Rights are absolute. I think that if you don't have a right to keep and bear arms or a right to free speech or worship, if that right's not absolute, then you're just a peasant begging for privileges from some potentate. Potentate's in Article 1, Section 29, Tennessee Constitution word. I love it. It's $2 word, yeah.
Please, King George, may I have another?
But it means that. And so I go to guns because it's that. And so we'll have Republicans say to me, well, we can't allow folks to fully exercise that right. We've already got it. Great. We've got constitutional carry. No, we don't.
True constitution.
No, we do not. No, we do not.
If it was, it would just be carry it. And you don't have to even write it down. Shall not infringe.
And we did infringe. And we did have a governor pushing for red flag laws. And there were lots of Republicans behind him, feeble-minded, spineless men who are okay. And I know those are hard words, but they're accurate words because they're feeble-minded because of this. If you allow the current government that you're a part of and have a say in to infringe upon our rights, you're not always going to be in power. You have to stand up for the absolutism, if you will, of those rights, or they start to become meaningless. And I think we've done that on gun rights. I think we've done that. Again, I'll go back to the dollars. Taxation is the first form of bondage. And we continue to tax folks and distribute money out to pick winners and losers. That is not small government effective republicanism.
No, and in Washington State, in Oregon, and California, it was the tyranny of the majority.
Yes.
In Tennessee, it's the tyranny of the minority. Why do these Democrats, who I just listed, a super minority, uber super minority, there's only 6 senators.
Yeah.
Why do they even have a seat at the table when they keep pushing these things that it seems like Lee embraces?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know this. I know that I wish that, boy, this will get me in trouble, but I'm going to say it. I hope they hear it. I wish my colleagues would pick their Tennessee Constitution up and read it from time to time, rather than relying on that lobbyist that slithers down the hall to tell them how to vote on things. And even more so, rather than that state employee lobbyist who lobbies against their rights. Because not today, we're not in session.
Taxpayer-funded lobbyists.
That's right. That's right. We have folks that have 6-figure salaries, right? $150,000, $200,000. Those are big salaries in East Tennessee, right? In my district, that's a lot of money. And they are routinely opposing your right to keep and bear, and what the Constitution says shall not be infringed. And they want to get into your private property ownership rights as to what you do with wetlands, and all for the clean water. I'm Mr. Geoengineering, so we should take care of the environment God's given us. But
I got questions about that.
But
I'm not going to let that off
okay,
easy.
All right. But we push back against private property ownership rights. My goodness, this year we're losing farmland at a clip that is unsustainable for a long term. Right? It's thousands of acres monthly. Right? And that's a problem. But to take $25 million of your money, of your dollars, and incentivize the farmer to put a forever easement on his farmland. And I'm in the great minority on this. I'm one of the maybe 20 Republicans that voted against this. But I said this in committee. I said that our founders were rolling over in their graves because part of that war that happened, that battle at Kings Mountain and that standing up against the British was about private property rights in the colonies. And then on the floor, I suggested that perhaps we were reliving a Jacob and Esau moment, and we're selling our birthrights. When I asked the governor's office if we had a pie chart of that $25 million for this Farmland Preservation Act, this permanent easement on farmlands, which, by the way, you could do a deeded easement today, right, if you wanted to. How much of that money is going to go to the farmer, and how much is going to go to an NGO to manage the easements, and how much is going to go to the attorney's fees? And the answer was, well, we don't know. And so you think about that and versus the $60 million that I just mentioned, and they're competitive dollars. We have this $25 million competing to hold farmland, while this $60 million is competing to put starter homes. And it's not always farmland. Often it is. And that's your money that we're playing these odds against one another.
And a property tax cap would go a long way to keep them there too, because when they wake up overnight and 56% the next day higher than it was the week before, that's not good. And they always love to take this victory lap, and I've done it too when I first got here. There's a map of the United States, which all around Tennessee is blank, the rest are red, Chinese ownership.
Yeah.
What you are describing is almost CCP ownership, because it's the government, communism taking over land as opposed to selling it out to a foreigner 10,000 miles away or 3,000 miles away, whatever it is, right?
Well, if you wanted to build a barn and you put one of these easements on your property and you want to put a barn where there's not a barn, you're going to have to get permission. Again, you're a peasant begging for a privilege from a potentate. And so the Nashville establishment, and I don't know that that's Bill Lee. Governor Lee, he has to wear that. Bill Lee may not think that way, but he's allowed some of the guidance that he's been given during his time in office to drive these kinds of things and to drive this atrocious growth in the budget. And unfortunately, we Republicans in the House and in the Senate, I would offer, I'm not in the Senate, but I would offer, have become too enthralled with the celebrity of the governor. And we have forgotten that concept that our founders held tightly to, that there needs to be a little tension between the legislative and the executive departments. Not unhealthy, not bad. It doesn't mean they even have to be the other party.
And that's where the press comes in, because they'll give him glowing accolades for doing the wrong thing, and the rest of them have to scramble and get in line, or else they're going to be attacked.
And this is the same press that's pro-abortion, anti-gun, supports transition surgeries on little boys and little girls. And if they're speaking favorably of something, you have to wonder, what's wrong with that?
Exactly right. I look for patterns like that all day long. Okay, I want to get into your success in the last session, but first, I got to do some wonkiness because that's what I do. Why did we pass a bill last session to ban geoengineering, but then fail to pass $100,000 per instance fine when they kept doing it in the last 12 months?
So I'll give you my opinion. I'm disappointed in that. I think we're going to get another shot at that. So House Bill 26.
Double it. Make it 200,000.
Yeah.
Make up for lost time.
Yes. House Bill 2063, we got through last year. Representative Halsey up in Upper East Tennessee in Sullivan County handed me that. That's not something I campaigned on, not something I was greatly aware of, to be honest. But as I started to research this, and to TDEC's credit, Department of Environment and Conservation, they helped work that bill so that we could get it passed, right? But the $10,000 fine as part of the Clean Air Act is small.
100,000.
Well, it's 10 right now.
Oh, is it 10?
It's 10 right now. And so this bill that we ran this year, House Bill 1112, would have taken that to 100,000, but it did a couple other things. It goes back to Title 58-2-116A, which was passed, I think, in the 2000 timeframe, and it establishes the authority of the governor and his agencies, his departments, to conduct studies, if you will, and gather information on floodplains, forest fire issues, drought, and weather modification. And so I found this after we passed 2063, right? Last spring before last. And so 1112 took 58-2-116, which is already on the books. And we say we're funded to enforce the law because the budget's growing like crazy. And it combined with the Clean Air Act that we passed, the Title 68 law that you'd referred to. And it assigned prosecutorial authority to our district attorneys and our attorney general, which I think they really kind of already have. But I wanted to make sure it was clear. And we raised it to a $100,000 fine and made a misdemeanor jail term out of this, right? And rather than just look at how we track the aircraft in the sky, because everybody focuses just on the stripes in the sky. And I'm not saying that's okay, the stripes in the sky. I'm just saying that I think there's a lot that we don't see, based on my research, that's probably worse than what we do see.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
What do you say to the people that say it's contrails, it's just ice, shut up, it's a conspiracy theory, when actually they're the conspiracy theorists by saying it's not?
I think they might be falling into the same category as those three senators that voted against it, because there was a person in the executive team told me that the governor didn't want to enforce the current law and didn't want this to pass, because Governor Lee worked against this bill you're asking about, what I would call the pathway to prosecution. He worked hard against it. I think he won that battle in the Senate with the three Republican senators. The Democrats are all about climate worship now, right? Yeah. You know, we've got to do something to save Al Gore's Earth.
Right.
But those three senators, I think, succumbed to pressure from the governor's office, because those paid state lobbyists we talked about on gun rights, you can bet yourself that they're doing the same thing. And so they voted no. The Senate, under their rules, Senator Bowling, Janice Bowling, great patriot, great Tennessean, I think, carried that bill for me in the Senate. And there's an opportunity to reconsider that in January. So I would just encourage anybody listening to this, call those three senators, call that whole Senate Ag Committee, and encourage them strongly that you want this, because I think this is a top 4 issue across the states.
If we want clean air and clean water, we're going to talk about more of that.
So, Florida followed us with this, and they passed something with some teeth in it this year. Their governor is a little more staunch about things than ours is.
He had a chance in his 8 years to be the number one Reagan-esque populist governor, red state, and he failed.
He's blown it.
And
Yeah,
DeSantis is the one and only.
I agree. I think so. But anyways, we had 32 other states follow Tennessee's lead. Now, they didn't do that just because they thought Monty Fritts, Bud Halsey were smart. They did that because their people wanted it. And so Florida passed it. West Virginia, I know I've talked to senators in South Carolina, North Carolina, Oklahoma. It It is a nationwide effort. So I think that's important.
Well, let's get real, because you're right. The people want it, but the same chemical companies tried to lobby to get immunity, like Reagan gave vaccine manufacturers the ability to be not liable for any harm their stuff like Bayer, Monsanto, Roundup caused, because it's costing them a fortune. Did you see the intense lobbying?
I did not. And I actually voted in support of just the label. And most of my base, what I would describe my base, they wanted me to vote to allow a greater access to the lawsuits to Bayer and Monsanto and the whole glyphosate thing. All my farmers want access to it. And so I voted in committee to support that. It died in the House, and I got lots of, well, Monty, you're trying to defend the clean skies and the water and the soil through that, but you're not taking care of this. And that was a tough one for me, to be honest with you. And
I actually was worried that Tennessee was going to be a rube, because it actually passed in North Dakota, which is crazy to me. First state in the nation to implement a law that provides legal protections for pesticide manufacturers, and they don't deserve it. I'm sure they'll try again here. What do you think will happen next time they come knocking?
Don't know. It didn't make it through this year, and I understand it went through in Georgia, and Kemp signed it. Their view or version of the bill was a little bit different than ours, but there's a huge public outcry against it, and
we can see it in the sky. I hate going on walks in the morning with the dog, and I see checkerboards up there.
Oh yeah.
That's just the visual one.
I was referring to the glyphosate bill. I was referring to the glyphosate bill.
Well, chemicals is a very broad category. It could be everything from pharmaceuticals to sky writing to we had a bill that said you can't put it in lettuce unless it's regulated like a medicine. Also no teeth in that though. And we import a lot of our stuff.
we do, unfortunately. I think to the geoengineering weather modification, I think there's already a huge outcry going into the Senate. I think it's going to grow over the fall. I think they're going to face immense pressure to push back on the governor's lobby. Again, I know he had people lobbying against that bill. The statement that I'm told come from the governor's office. Now, I don't know if it's Governor Lee or whomever tells him what to do, that it was big government overreach to try to control weather modification and geoengineering. And it's a fact it has taken place. And the other thing,
RFK Jr. said it was a crime, and he's now head of HHS, which is the biggest budget in the whole federal government. So if he thinks so, we could probably go along with it. Like, let's at least minimize it.
I think it's unconstitutional, first, because we, the people, have not consented to being test subjects to barium, strontium, aluminum, or even the cloud seeding. And secondly, I think it is immoral, because Scripture says, the heavens are mine, saith the Lord. And for us to try to decide who gets rain and who doesn't, just keep it to just the cloud seeding. Because 8 or 9 states in the West cloud seed actively now for snow, for rain, for whatever.
For all the people that call me a conspiracy theorist, I just say go to the Idaho Power website and you will see they proudly tell you a whole page dedicated to cloud seeding from its inception to what they did yesterday. And it's toxic in the fish on the ground, so why wouldn't it be toxic for the humans?
Aerial and ground-based cloud seeding. And so here's, I think, the question. And I've talked to our Attorney General about this, and he was receptive to the discussion. If cloud seeding is effective in the western states, it is. And they market that is, and they get dollars, tax dollars and private dollars to do this. Then, and if God designed this whole mechanism to work so that the heat of the sun evaporates the water and draws it up to a cloud, the cloud hits some density based on barometric pressure and everything, what that density is of moisture in the sky. And when it reaches a saturation to supersaturation, it rains. If they get 10% more rain in Arizona than what they would have normally gotten, how much less did we get in Tennessee? How much less did you get in Arkansas or in Iowa?
Not only that, but the ground can't handle it. So you get your floods, which turn it into Malibu fires, which, I mean, it's just not good to mess with Mother Nature in general. And then I saw people, we've had some really rough weather this year in Tennessee. softball-sized hail.
Yeah.
I saw videos on TikTok of people going out, enjoying that and eating it. Well, you're not eating H2O frozen. You're eating dry ice and aluminum and all the rest. Like, don't do that. It's like you said, biblically unsound to mess. It's Tower of Babel.
It is Tower of Babel. It is that huge, boy, that's a whole other show. But we are in this great conflict today, I think, between the creationist worldview that our founders adhered to. None of them were perfect men. Those 56 signers, the one that drafted the Constitution, our first governors, they weren't perfect. They were flawed men. But they were creationist in their worldview, and they understood that their blessings come from God, and they would be held accountable for their sins before God. That's the reason that Declaration of Independence could have easily been titled a Declaration of Dependence upon Almighty God. But that was then. Today, we have the Tower of Babel human secularism, or secular humanism rather, worldview, that we can control the weather, we can control your rights, we can tell you when you speak and what you eat and what you inject in your arms, and even control the clouds. And so
But they had clean weather and no airplanes. So.
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay. So, but along those lines, Utah and Florida passed banning fluoride in the drinking water after the NIH, of all places, finally admitted it's a neurotoxin and knocks IQ points off kids in California, where I grew up, with IQ points knocked off because I was drinking that water. We failed to pass that here in Tennessee. They say the dental lobby came out and forced to keep it. Yeah. What's your take on that now that we know it's harmful, but we left adding it in to 88% of our state's drinking water?
I think that that toxicity and that resulting impacting our cognitive ability, perhaps some of these politicians have been drinking more water than others, because it was I had signed on as a co-sponsor for that bill, and it took it down to 0.4, the unit of measure, and you had to sample 3 times successfully before you could stop sampling. And I thought it was a robust bill to deal with this, and I'm told that it was a dental lobby. Now, that doesn't mean that it's Dr. Smith down the road. What I have learned about these lobbies is they don't really represent the people in many cases that they say they represent. They represent some globalist, anti-American entity. And they have a title. You know, I think lobbying is like the second or third oldest profession, is what I've learned to
Probably
think.
True.
And there are good people.
Whisper in the king's ear, yeah.
There are good people. There are folks that stand up for your rights every day that we're in session. There are Bobby Petraeus and John Harris's and people who try to do the right thing. But the halls are filled full of people who slither down the halls and attack your rights. And they influence the politician who doesn't think for him or herself to vote their way. And some of those work for Umpty Squat Strategies Incorporated, or LLC. And some of them work for the Department of Safety or the Department of Environment and Conservation and State.
Do you think now that you're onto that, there's a chance to get rid of that in our lifetime, or is that just going to be the way it is and you have to hope that the elected official like you can see through it and be like, I think you're representing others than you're representing in your business card?
Yeah, I think that they're so addicted to those campaign donations and the free steak dinners and everything that you got to vote these people out of office to make that change.
Make them start a relationship all over again. Okay.
Yep.
So Tennessee's lakes, and which they make up, by the way, 16,710 miles of water, nearly 60% are considered too polluted for activities like swimming. Data shows that close to half of the state's lakes are impaired by pollutants at about 46.5%. I had a young man on the show about a year, maybe 2 years ago now, the conservation kid, Cash Daniels. God bless him. He's trying to clean them up by himself. He's the one who told me that Tennessee River was one of the most polluted in the world. Does anybody ever lobby for the rivers?
Sure. We have lots of folks that come in with concerns about clean water and take care of the Duck River's been a huge issue over the last bit.
Just lost some money.
Yes, it did. And to pay, I'm told, part of that's going to pay for a no fiscal note, no caucus bill that some folks.
I have a note on that, but it was supposed to be zero to have no caucuses, but it ended up being after the fact. And Todd Warner, who's a friend of yours on the committee, freaked out and said we were being lied to. Were we being lied to?
I think so. I would agree with Todd.
Is that going to like because it was a lie, maybe, what would you call it, invalidate it?
Here's what I was told. Because I watched that same video from the Senate where the Senate said, hey, we've got to pass this. We've got to fund what we passed yesterday, was basically, that's paraphrase. And so I'll go up to one of the budget folks on the floor and I said, what is this? Why are we voting on this today? This was a no. He knew I voted against that anyways, right? Because there was an outcry of people, don't do this thing on the caucus. It was one of the many ways I think that we Republicans lost confidence of our voters this year, because things that were important to Joe Tennessean or Susie Roane Countyan that we just seemed to ignore and go ahead and vote. And we did that on caucuses. So I said, what's this $8 million? I said, I'm just going to vote for it. Just more money I can send to my county. I'm like,
Williamson County?
No.
Oh.
This guy's not from Williamson County. He's from Northern Plateau. But I'm like, it's not our money. That's not my money to spend.
Very illustrative of how they think, yeah.
It is. And I did 8 budget amendments this year on this budget. I tried my best. I voted against the budget, as I told you.
Did, yeah.
I voted against this silly special session thing, which was immoral in the concept. Vouchers. I'll say this again. It makes lots of my friends uncomfortable. They get mad at me and don't speak to me for 2 weeks maybe. Article 11, Section 12 does not permit us to do what we did. In Monty's humble country boy opinion, the words are clear. It's specific and restrictive.
All right, let's get it.
The General Assembly shall provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards for a system of free public schools, period. And so, anyways, we ignored
the full K through 12 scholarship, exactly.
Free
right.
public schools.
Critics have come out strongly about Tennessee's lack of really good efforts to demagnetize our state from illegal aliens. We passed a few things this session, but a lot more died this one and last session. We have Trump now and Tom Homan. What is your perception of Tennessee's work to reduce crime, drugs by deporting illegal aliens? And I ask that in the same context of what you just said. We spend $600 million to educate illegal aliens in this state. That money could go a lot further, because nothing says you have to put them in K through 12 schools. Why not just sit them in front of a computer in Spanish, teach them how to learn English an hour a day, and call that education? Yeah,
I've got one of my schools in my district that is pushing 50% of K through 5 school, pushing 50% English as second language.
Yeah, right. Translators in there?
Well, it's what that does. It's more than the money. The money is bad enough, but it's the capacity to instruct, because every teacher has so many instructional minutes or hours per day. And if those instructional minutes or hours are taken, and lots of these kids, foreign kids, are some of the most diligent in their studies, and every one of them are created in God's image, but some adult brought them across that border illegally. And it doesn't matter if senators get on TV and cry and say we've got to support the children and these weak people. The public wanted us to do something. I had a bill this year, and it infuriates me that we didn't have the guts to deal with it collectively. It said that you will provide every Tennessean. Doesn't matter if you have blue eyes, brown eyes. Doesn't matter if you have my skin tone, your skin tone, his skin tone. You bring a birth certificate or other document that kid has a legal right to be in school, or you pay the TISA amount, period. There was no option, no anything. And there's not the will to vote for those things. And I will tell you, I bet you I can go to most places in Tennessee, most, not all, but most, and they'll support that.
Yeah.
And
did it get out of a committee?
I think.
Did it even make it out of a committee?
No.
Right. That's the problem.
And the other one, which Williams' bill, and I've signed on as a co-sponsor with Lambert's bill which was very specific to just allow the LEA to decide whether or not they're going to accept illegal children, right? We need to do something. So I'd signed on as co-sponsor of that as well. We need to do something. And so the Senate decided that they're going to add the dollars on much after my bill had been filed, which is fine. We have a lot of copycatting or pseudo-copycatting in the General Assembly. But we couldn't even get that passed. And the truth is, most of these school systems were going to be advised by their council, if we had passed it and given an option, they would have said, there is no way we're going to turn that child away. They'd be scared to death of the federal funds, because that was part of what came out with this bill. That's a smoke screen. Well, really, I've got to say it. It's a smoke screen for weak people, because they're saying, well, we'll lose federal dollars. Well, you know what? Maybe the cost of what we're accepting is higher than the federal dollar we might lose.
So there you go. The year before, Cameron Sexton was saying we were going to send the federal dollars back from the education department
1.8,
and go it our own way, and then it died out. You didn't hear that again, and then this comes along, which means they really didn't mean it. Or maybe he did, but the General Assembly, no, they didn't want to give up those dollars.
Well, we passed a couple. I had 3 what I would call illegal alien bills last year. We got 2 of them passed. And so I'm going to pose the question soon of how many we've prosecuted, because one of those bills, and this was it was in the 113th General Assembly. If you are an illegal and you commit any violent crime, your sentence can be enhanced to life in prison with no parole. And if you're an illegal and you commit any crime in possession of a deadly weapon, not just a gun, like all these anti-gunners, they'll write something about a Glock, or the silly Glock switch bill we did this year, proving they're anti-gun people. Let's make it all deadly weapons. If the illegal comes into Tennessee, first it's bad enough that they've come across the border illegally. They've committed a crime.
Strike one. Yeah.
Yes, strike one. That's right. If you come here and do something violent, or you do something criminal, and we should lock you up forever.
Can't we lock them up in their own country, though, instead of paying for taxpayers?
I don't want to pay to keep them incarcerated in the Tennessee Department of Corrections. I do not. I just don't want them to come here.
Right.
And so there has to be a consequence. But even though we got that passed, if they don't prosecute against it, then there's no consequence. And they'll continue to come in and murder our children. And I'm not talking about every illegal, Steve.
No.
Lots of those people.
If we have 1 million illegals and 1% are bad, that's 10,000 bad people. That's exactly a lot. I get it. I totally get it. And Tennessee should be the state where you're least likely to want to come. Kind of like we talked about the veterans, maybe the 25th least likely to retire to because of whatever reason. Illegals should be it. But the housing and development industry probably wouldn't love that as much as I do.
Well, one last thing about it. Someone, I don't remember who had the bill. We were going to stop testing in anything other than English. And we couldn't even, driver's license testing. And we couldn't even pass that.
Well, you also had the Trump Act that Gino put out there that would have taxed remittances going back to other countries. And they couldn't even do that, which I kept saying, do it in 3 bills, not 1, because they'll kill the whole thing as a poison pill. Couldn't even do that.
So
that's business friendly, right? The state would make money on that problem, but no, they didn't do it.
That's those feeble-minded. They don't realize what they're doing to themselves long term and don't care.
Well, see, a guy like you, next year is 250th anniversary of the United States. You've been here longer in your DNA. Your family has been here longer, and you live in such a beautiful part of Tennessee, halfway between Nashville and all its bars and Broadway with all the famous country singers bars, and Pigeon Forge, which is a huge tourist attraction right along I-40 there. Tennessee takes in $30 billion a year, that was last year, from tourism, $3 billion of it from whiskey tours alone, bigger than Kentucky's. Since we don't have an income tax, and sales tax is most counties' major revenue next to property tax, and tourism is huge for sales tax, how do your constituents feel about things like tax breaks for NFL stadium, corporate deals like Ford and In-N-Out Burger that really help Davidson County, and that's about it? Probably some folks in Kingston that will never pay $1,000 for a family of 4 to see a Titans game.
I can tell you how this Tennessean feels. It was part of the reason I ran for office, is because I saw that we were sending $550 million to a billionaire who owns a professional football team. I love football, but that's not the taxpayer's responsibility. It's not the role of government. I drive a Ford pickup. I didn't drive it out today, but it's not the role of the taxpayer to incentivize that. And we do that lots. We're good with corporate welfare and the picking who gets to win and picking who loses by default, right? Mm-hmm. That is not the role of government. And part of that $59.5 billion budget, we could trim a large section of fat off that budget if we stop doing those things. And once you take that fat off of that spend, you can take the precision knife to the collection and let the Tennessean keep more of their own money. Nobody in baseball stadiums, We'll pass a bill that does something good, and it'll lay on the governor's office 10 days desk. And I'm sure it'd be most of the governors. Most of them are told what to do. We have a hard time, I think we have a hard time finding men of great resolve to run for these leaders. And
like the Davy Crockett's we talked
yes,
about.
yes.
Yeah.
Sam Houston.
Those days are gone.
Yes. Well, I don't think they're gone. I think politics is so sickening to most folks. And you, after you've been around a group
people
of
that just can't afford the pay cut.
That's right. So I think most people, they despise us paying for baseball stadiums. And again, the priority of things, it's evident if you see inside behind the curtain and you see the guy that's really playing the wizard, not the one on the screen, it's a much different view.
Yeah.
And so
special interest.
If we get a bill through that's going to allow the sale of beer into a new baseball stadium, it'll be signed the next day. I have a buddy in Middle Tennessee that refers to it as the wicked liquor lobby. And it's powerful. The hospital lobby.
Well, I just told you, $3 billion of tourism alone.
Powerful.
Not just sales, tourism.
Yeah.
In 1988, you were a union steward.
Yeah.
The South has finally cracked a little, and now a historic victory. An overwhelming majority of Volkswagen workers in Chattanooga, Tennessee, have voted to join the UAW.
Yeah.
That was April 2024 headline, and sure enough, March 13th, 2025,
yeah.
the United Auto Workers Union said on Thursday it filed unfair labor practices charges against Volkswagen. What do you think will happen to the auto industry in Tennessee going forward?
Yeah, I think lots of things about that. First, I think that every union I know of above the steward level, I would call them dirty and rotten and self-serving. You only have to look at what happened with the UAW in this last election.
Yeah. You don't even have to deal with the teachers like I did in Washington.
This idiot was promoting Biden to be for the auto industry, and we're shipping all the jobs out of the country. So foolish, corrupt people, I think. I did that. I enjoyed standing up for what was right and wrong for people. The unfortunate thing about it is lots of times the union mentality drives toward that lazy, worthless employee that won't work, won't show up, and the stewards end up spending lots of their time taking care of that rather than just enforcing the contract between the company and the workforce.
Right. Babysitting instead of, make good cars.
I've managed two workforces that were union. One was a U.S. Steel union, and one was ATLC, Atomic Trades and Labor. And the working folks, the steward level, was great. So oftentimes, we had some in Oak Ridge. We even had presidents of union that were good men or women to work with and honest and wanted the people to work and just wanted to have a say. And I don't have any opposition to that. But one of my big faults with Ford is, and then I like my F-250, but I don't want that UAW culture coming anywhere near Tennessee because it is toxic.
Yeah, look what Dell did to Austin and Boeing did to Seattle. I know. Governor Lee only has had 3 emergency sessions: COVID, red flag laws, and Ford. Mm-hmm. Tennessee offered a significant $884 million incentive package to Ford for its Blue Oval City mega campus near Memphis, where Ford plans to build electric vehicles and batteries. This package included a $500 million grant, $200 million for infrastructure, $138 million for the mega site, and $40 million for workforce training. I don't know why we're doing that. In addition, Tennessee is providing a performance-based forgivable loan of up to $250 million, a site for the operation, and funding for workforce training. Oops. August 22, 2024, production of Ford Motor Company's electric next-generation pickup truck at its new West Tennessee plant will be delayed until 2027. Was this a big mistake or long-term gain?
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake. I think we see this in all kinds. It goes back to the 0% interest loans I was talking about. If government tries to force something to happen, it messes up the whole motor of capitalism. And shame on Ford, shame on GM, shame on any of the companies that will dictate what their long-term plans are based on who occupies the White House. Go to what the customer wants. There's a few people want electric trucks. but it is not the majority.
No, and they left the North because of the heavy unions. They came to the South, and they wanted the cheaper labor, and then they went to Mexico for the even cheaper labor, and then China for the even cheaper labor, and now they're trying to take advantage of Tennessee's taxes. That's a big number.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to do a little lightning round, I guess, because we're running out of time. XAI is using 5 million gallons of water a day for Elon's supercomputer. That's next door to Blue Oval in Memphis. You need water for those cars. I don't know what that's all about. But Senator Taylor is trying to get the DA and mayor and chief of police to do their jobs and protect citizens because their crime is up so much. FBI Kash Patel said #1 crime city in America, and their water goes bad, and they just hiked their property taxes. Do you think they'll lose more residents, and will they end up in your neighborhood or in Middle Tennessee?
I'd love to have some of those West Tennessee folks move into Roane County, because I think lots of them are good people that want the same things you and I do. They want to live free. Liberty is the foundation of enduring prosperity for any people. And so all those things you just described are an example of why that mentality, which has typically been the Democrat leadership in a corrupt Memphis for a long time, what's reportedly corrupt, right?
Since the beginning,
Yeah. But we're embracing those things in Nashville now.
Yeah.
And we're embracing them with an R next to our names.
Right.
And it's like folks don't see what's coming from this. And that
was what my point about the super minority running the show, because I guess they forget that Republicans have only been in the supermajority for about 11, 12 years. And prior to that, I think 150 years the Democrats ran the show.
Yeah.
Dixiecrats.
Yeah.
They're all Dixiecrats.
Yeah. So I would embrace some of them coming. I will tell you this, things that concern me about AI, and I understand Elon's producing his own electricity. We're importing 1 out of 4 kilowatts right now in Tennessee that we use.
TVA imports it?
Yes. So that means they're buying it off a market economy from Duke or Southern Power or somebody. And this rate increase that you're going to feel, excuse me, is going to be a result of that, because they buy at a more premium rate. One of the most disappointing things this year.
By the way, they bankrupted California this way on purpose in the old Enron days. So Tennessee should look at history books and see what can happen if you let utilities and liberalism.
We're about to shut down a coal-fired plant in Kingston. We shut down Bull Run. My first meeting with Governor Lee was, please go use your say. Don't allow them to shut down Bull Run. 4.3% of our generating capacity for the state of Tennessee. And we shut it down with no replacement. So we're going to build gas and batteries. And I got a chance to speak at the 70th anniversary of the Kingston steam plant a couple of weeks ago. I'm all for the solar and the battery as they can be used as backup or whatever. And I'm all for the gas. But keep those 9 coal units burning. We've got to bridge this delta to the nuclear future. Our demand for electricity is tremendous. AI demands lots of electricity.
And water.
Yes, and water. That's right. And we need to start thinking about the infrastructure. We're going to put, I would do things a little differently than the governor would.
By the way, the AI, that water we talked about, that with the fluoride in it and the pollution stuff, it can't use that. That's why it wants the Spartan aquifer, which is older than everybody, even your family line, because it's pure.
Yeah. And why wouldn't we be drinking that? Yeah.
And get ready for earthquakes. That's what Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well,
they are drinking. They're not going to be able to for long.
Yes.
It'll look like the surface of the moon one day. If AI keeps growing at its pace, it'll look like the moon.
We're going to, again, secular humanism is AI, I think. I'm not a big fan of the AI. Let me do my own thinking. I don't need a machine to tell me what to think and write my papers for me. I don't need lobbyists or machines to tell me what to think. Yeah. But we're going to put $1 billion into roads. We should upkeep the roads that we have now. We absolutely should. But the infrastructure that is going to crush us the quickest is going to be water availability, sewage disposal, solid waste, and electricity. Focusing on, I heard someone say they want to build 4 lanes into every county seat. Well, are we going to print that money to do that? And roads, again, traffic in Nashville's horrible. And I know part of this is unpopular.
Potholes are pretty bad too.
The potholes need to be fixed. Quit adding lanes. Fix what we have.
Especially after an ice storm Monday.
And we better solve, if we're going to keep growing, we have a lagging response to the growth right now. And that cannot be sustained. We better get someone in that has the vision to get ahead of this. We're already behind. So we're going to have to work really hard to get up to what we need and then surpass that.
When China starts selling those solar panels in the summer in anticipation of a hailstorm like we just had, the size of a softball, on that $1 billion farm goes to zero overnight, we'll regret, just like the Ford deal. Okay, you were on the, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure we get as many things as we pack in as we can. You're on the Immigration of Extraordinary Session House Standing Committee with some serious players. Jody Barrett, that had a hard time with Education Committee. Gino Bolso and his Trump Act that failed, I said, in committee because 3 guys didn't bother to show up that day. Yeah. Chris Todd and Justin Jones, Gloria Johnson, Susan Lynn, Todd Warner, another guy that didn't get treated too nicely. Newcomer Michelle Renault that knocked off powerful committee chairwoman Hazelwood, and Jason Zachary from Knox. These are serious people you get to work with. Susan Lynn's been on my show. 8 of those actually have been on my show, and you too. And I am blessed to say that. What can you tell us about that committee and your colleagues, and why maybe some of their really good Republican red-blooded bills failed in a committee as opposed to on the floor, which it probably would have, every one of them would have passed?
So I was told just recently, so I'm a vice chair of 2 committees this year, and I appreciate that. I appreciate getting that. I had no desire to be in leadership in none. I'm limited on my own, how long I'm going to serve. I term limited myself when I got into this. And didn't want to be a committee chair or anything like that. Haven't asked to. I would just want to speak, be a voice for the people that I work for, right? And to take on some of these issues that need to be addressed, must be addressed. We can't continue to stick our head in the sand on these things. But I was told by someone else who's a vice chair of a committee who gets invited to the committee meetings. I don't get, and I didn't realize the reason of having them, just to be honest. And I was told by this.
Post it on a calendar for everybody to see in neon lights so that you wouldn't miss one?
Well, maybe it's my fault, I bet, but I hadn't seen them. And so what this person told me was, in those committee meetings, it's not just the legislative people there, but it's also someone from the governor's office. And they talk about things. And I know I've had committee chairs come to me and say, well, we're not going to pass this bill. Okay, why? Well, if the answer is it's a Marxist approach, and if you read it, that's good. We should have those kinds of conversations. But if it's just because this person's carrying it, I'm not sure that's what we're supposed to do.
That's a backroom deal in the front room.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so I can't use the word that I use for that. I use it occasionally, and my wife will kick me if I use it on a camera, so I'm not going to, but it starts with chicken. And we do that. We do that. And we cut those deals. And so when Barrett talks to you, he invited me out to Hickman County recently for a GOP dinner. And I suggested to him, I said, Jody, I know you're not trying to this is going to be an uncomfortable thing. But the reason that Trump is catching the hell that Trump is catching is because, and he gets it from both parties, is because they don't want someone speaking for the people. They want someone who will go along with the establishment. Status quo politics in both parties is poison. George Washington, in his letter of farewell after 2 terms as president, warned us about partisan politics and the dangers of it. And if you read that, you could template it on today, his entire letter first, but especially that part. And Trump makes this statement. Trump is Trump. Donald Trump is Donald Trump, right? He's one of a kind. But he says, it's not me. It's you that they're coming after, and I'm just in the way. I will tell you, you can see that some with the Todd Warners, and I'm afraid to mention many names because we're so petty in some of this.
Well, I can say the names. Jody Barrett. They created a whole new committee just to avoid his vote on education, just to get what they wanted with friendlies.
And Jody's been open about that.
Yeah. And he's going to be sitting in that chair next week.
All that to just get to this point, he's telling you the truth. And it is a thing. You'll have things said to you like, well, be careful what you say there. What does that mean? Our prayer resolution. It was my number 1 priority for this year.
I wanted to talk about it. HJR 0051.
Yes.
A resolution to seek Almighty God's hand of ever-present mercy and healing on Tennessee, signed by Governor on 5/2/2025. That must have been a very proud moment for you, huh?
It is. We did this last year, established last July as a month of prayer and fasting for those who are spiritually inclined and physically able. I'm convinced that we've gotten ourselves in such a hole that we can't dig out of it legislatively. We can't dig out of it with budget, either by growing the budget or cutting the budget. I think we need a move of God in Tennessee. I think that we have shed so much innocent blood. We just passed another bill that's going to shed innocent blood in Tennessee, HB533 this year. It was forced through by leadership on the floor, stopped the questions, and the in vitro fertilization and emergency contraception parts of it are egregious. And
we went from the strictest anti-abortion laws to now loosening it, melting it.
That's the way evil works.
Right.
Satan doesn't come up to you with a pitchfork and a tail and antlers and tell you who he is. He says to Eve, he says, did God really say that? That's the way evil works. And we did that with this bill. We knew we had folks. I talked to leadership. I said, we had people that voted for this that didn't know what they were voting for. Shame on them for not reading it. Shame on them for not doing the research. Shame on Tennessee Right to Life for not being in the fight, hard in the fight. Shame on the church. I'm Southern Baptist, so I can say this.
Yeah.
Shame on the Southern Baptist for not being lined up to watch the ERLC.
I get the sense that a lot of us are just beaten to hell. I mean, I don't know if it was COVID that did it or if it was just the 60s and the counterculture, but we're just so tired of this that we can't just go back. I mean, as the code got bigger, we got weaker and weaker and weaker because, let's just jump to the next one.
Let me say this before you jump to that next.
Okay.
Now is not the time to relent. We're winning.
Never is the time to relent.
We're winning.
People have to fall off because they get tired and die.
Here's why I think we're winning. So much evil exposed. People that told you that they were absolute right to life in the dark hours of the night signed this 533 into law.
So they're
evil.
Now they're on record as
evil has exposed itself. We had the people on school vouchers. We had the people on this caucus. We had the people on the farmland preservation thing. And yet we vote those things through in great numbers. It is in America, I think, and I'll be quick with this and I'll stop. I didn't mean to cut you off. That in America, God didn't give us a prince. He certainly didn't give us a potentate. He didn't give us a governor or a country boy state representative to tell you what to do. He gave us a constitution. So every time we get outside the boundaries of that constitution and try to usurp authority as a government that we have not been given, it is not only a high crime, but it is also a great sin. Because if you hold that our founders were creationists in a worldview, and they trusted God to give us that. It took years to write the Constitution, right?
Right. They're not just rights, they're inalienable.
That's right. Can't be taken away, can't be given up. If that's true, then every time that we violate it, we have not only committed a crime, constitutional crime, we've sinned. And I'm convinced that's the case. And I think that
it took a country boy to say it, not a HVAC guy. But
and that's the reason that we did the prayer resolution. The frustration I felt after I sat in Governor Lee's mansion and he pushed for the red flag laws got me started in last year's version. I couldn't believe that we had folks that said they were Republicans and that they were Christians, that they were going to tear into the people's rights without the authority to do so. And my frustration, my sinful frustration, started writing that. God turned it into something. Nobody else in the country's done anything like this. We went back to what Adams had done and others. We could have went to Washington. You could have went to several of our founders and framers. You could have went to the Continental Congress and saw 20-something examples of days of fasting and prayer. And it was always humble themselves or in humility or in shame is the way they wrote them.
Yeah, too many people.
So we tried to pattern that.
Too many people have bought into the whole Thomas Jefferson letter that is separation of church and state, which was really not even a law, and it still isn't. But they also think that the poem on the Statue of Liberty is law as well, even though it's nowhere in the Constitution. So this is a secular universe that we live in, unfortunately. And when we vote, we don't vote for pope or preacher even. We vote for a congressperson or assembly person who has to represent 20,000 people who 10,000 of which may not even be Christian believers and may be offended by that resolution. Right. But Tennessee is the state that did the month of prayer and fasting. And now the bill that was signed 0327 designates the month of June, which starts next week, as Celebration of Life Month, the month of July as Celebration of Liberty Month, and the month of August as Celebration of the Pursuit of Happiness. These are a month in Tennessee. I love that. That's Gino Bolso. Yeah. But June is the one day for veterans, Memorial Day, and a month for Pride, a deadly sin. Yeah. Are we canceling Pride Month in favor of Life Month next week?
I've never honored it. The Bible says pride is a sin. Homosexuality is a sin. And that doesn't mean that you treat people badly, but to embrace it, to have 9 people in robes decide that we're going to redefine the institution of marriage, they don't have that authority. And if we just decide that we're going to go along with that, again, love and compassion speaks truth. Sometimes truth is hard. If I have children, and when my boys were small, if they had found themselves at the precipice of a great cliff, and a fall from that precipice would have resulted in their death, as they walk toward it, I should, in compassion, son, don't do that. Son, come back here. But at some point in time, it's important. Love grabs the belt loop of the son and says, don't step off there. And we've become reluctant in our churches. God's people are the ones that have failed here. And I'm part of that. Okay, so I'm not pointing at anyone. I'm part of that. But God's people have failed to exhibit the authority that they have been given. Jesus said in Matthew 28:18, he says, all authority has been given me on heaven and earth. We don't live like that. We buy into the fabricated version of the letter, the Jefferson letter that you mentioned, and assume that there's a separation of church and state. We forget that Article 1, Section 3 of the Tennessee Constitution mentions God by Almighty God, that we have a right to worship Almighty God. Doesn't mean that we hate on people that are atheists or Muslim or Buddhist, but our Constitution doesn't guarantee, the Tennessee Constitution doesn't guarantee any right for those pursuits. It's the God of the Bible. And when I say that, eyeballs get big. Because they're like, oh, Monty's one of those guys. Just telling you what the words say.
Yeah, no other state than this one would do it. I've done a lot of shows, more than I wish, actually. I felt I had to, about NGOs aiding and abetting illegals and the trafficking of humans. HB 0811 allows a charitable organization that provides housing to a person whom the charitable organization knows is unlawfully present in the United States to be held liable for a loss, damage, injury, or death. Became published chapter 311 on 5/13/2025. What happens if Catholic Charities, let's say, gets arrested, like that DHS 196 were arrested in Nashville, where Jazim Jafaf al-Rash convicted of rape? Will they be liable now?
I think they should be. I would even take that a step further than what we did. I think that if you own property and you're knowingly renting to an illegal anywhere in these United States,
confiscate it.
You ought to be an accomplice in those crimes.
They're selling drugs. That's what they do.
That's right.
What's the difference?
That's right.
Humans. Yeah.
That's right.
HB 0445, restoring individuals with felony convictions voting rights. These are all yours, by the way. Should felons get to vote?
I think so. After they've paid their full, and that was actually Halsey's bill, I think, this year.
Okay.
Yeah,
maybe you were on it.
I was a co-sponsor. Yeah. And it's something we've been working on. So I am of this opinion, which mortifies some people when I say it as well. But if you commit a crime, a felony crime, and you pay all your court costs and all the restitution, and you've served all your time, you should get all your rights back. All your rights back.
Your time.
All your rights back. And that all. So this bill goes back to voting rights. What was happening was that felons former felons weren't able to vote because they didn't have gun rights.
I was going to say, what if they killed somebody and they do their time and now they get their gun rights back?
So that would be my vote. I would offer that our founders, if they found you so violent that you couldn't be trusted with your musket or your knife, they would have just hung you.
We certainly never would have had a desert fox if it wasn't for that. Or a swamp fox. He was a bad dude, but we needed him. HB 132 limits the duration of a state of emergency declared by the governor to 30 days. Man, I was in Washington during COVID, and our governor held them 1,000 days, long after COVID was long gone in every county. He became a dictator. He did a bunch of stuff with schools that you never would have done in a normal session. Lee signed that. So next time, not for him, he'll be gone probably unless it happens this year. Things will be different. How do you think Lee and the state handled the pandemic, and what's your assessment of Lee's legacy on your watch?
Handled it horribly, I think. And I think, one of those bills, he sent a letter out that he was not going to sign it because it was going too far. And I think it was headed toward a little bill that I was carrying. I think that was 562. Again, I didn't bring any notes but that's the essentialism bill.
I didn't write that one down.
So during COVID in the state of Tennessee, it started in the governor's office. They declared people non-essential by their lawful occupations. That's immoral and unconstitutional. So for 3 years, I've tried to get a bill through that said that you cannot declare Steve or Monty non-essential based on their lawful occupation. And if you do, you can be sued for it. And so we got that through committee, got it to the floor, had the votes for it on the floor, I think. I wasn't going to get all 75 votes. But somewhere between because the governor's office fought it like crazy.
He certainly wouldn't want to sign off on that because he closed about 130. Yes. He'd be basically signing his own liability waiver.
He sent his paid lobbyist to testify before committees. He sent his director of team, who's a nice enough guy, he just don't understand the Constitution, his authority. And he said, if we pass this bill, we won't be able to control looting. Think of the insult.
Looting.
The insult that he's offering to every barber, because barbers were one of those declared non-essential people. You didn't need a haircut during COVID, right? Because you're going to die if we cut your hair.
Right. But you did need alcohol and gambling taxes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And realtors. My wife's a realtor. I'm a realtor now. We're retired. I put up signs for her occasionally. But
in Seattle strip clubs, I don't know about here, but they were illegal. You just couldn't touch them.
They should be illegal everywhere, I think. But anyways, because it's degrading to people.
We're going to look back on that time and just have to shake our heads at what the lunacy was.
So Andrew Farmer from Sevier County stood up, and he did it in coordination with a couple other people in Republican leadership. Because I'd worked the bill with Republican leadership, made a last-minute change to the bill to get it passed, and got the nod from leadership. And he sent it back to a committee that was already closed. Calls me the next day. And I said, are you going to open that committee? No. I said, so you sent it back to a closed committee? Well, I'm a little concerned that our mayors and our governors and people, they really give a lot to serve in these offices. We don't want to get them where they might be sued. And I'm like, it's easy, Andrew. Just don't do unconstitutional things. Don't make stupid edicts, and you won't get stupid punishment.
That's why you have an attorney general.
But again, much energy you see in that one, because we've been fighting it for 3 years. We had people lose everything because of that. And, you shouldn't even have to force that. But the fact that the governor's office is fighting that is so revealing of what they think about your rights.
Yeah. All right. Last question. We are in overtime. Thank you for the extra time. You announced already you're running for D32 again. Any thought on what comes next? Going to be like Susan Lee and stay in that seat 20 years or maybe Senate?
No.
Senate, D.C. maybe?
I have announced that I am not running for District 32.
Oh, I missed
when I ran, I told everybody we have too many career politicians. And I won't go back on that. I've had a lot of people talk to me about running for other things or running for this again. Well, Monty, they won't hold it against you. Usually it's a politician tell me that, right? But, I gave a commitment. I've got about 60% of what I wanted to get done in 4 years done, and I'm only less than 3 years into it. And so we're going to try to get a few more things done. I want to finish this geoengineering thing. I want to do something on property tax. I want to do something on pornography and the filth that we see along the interstates with the signs advertising pornography in the state of Tennessee, because we're increasing human trafficking. I don't care what revenue we're getting off of these filthy places. Shame on us.
Well, we're going to have a Super Bowl pretty soon. That's the biggest day of it, and it's going to happen. Yeah. Hopefully you can do something. Well, that's good.
Yeah. So
I'm just going to hold you to, you're not going to run again for that seat.
That's right.
You're not going to run for anything?
Yeah, I'm praying about it.
Okay.
I'm praying about something.
That door's open.
I am. Yeah.
Lightly.
And I don't really want to be honest with you. I'd like to spend more time with my wife. I would like to spend more time with my grandkids. I'd like to be around fewer lobbyists and sleazy politicians. I've met some really good men and women in this. I don't want to leave on the note that all are bad. They're not. But we're hurting for a good leader in Tennessee. We're hurting for, and I mean in several positions. Not that they're not good folks, but they're not leaders. Leaders are born, not made. Leaders are refined. But just as God didn't make everybody like David or like Daniel or like Esther, he doesn't do that today. And so I think we have lots of people that find themselves because they have lots of money to throw into being the next state representative from District 32. I spent $34,000 to get elected total. I could probably didn't have to spend over 20. I just didn't know what I was doing. But we have folks here in Middle Tennessee that have spent lots more than that, right? $1 million more.
Diplomacy.
Yeah. And we'll spend on a Senate race $15 million. Wow.
It's going to be interesting to see what the governor's race does this year, because if it's, Rose, Marsha Blackburn, there's a lot of names, Tim Burchett. I mean, that could be a $100 million race too.
It's crazy. It's obscene.
It is. And what's it worth if you lead like this?
Yeah. And I think you ought to be able, in today's economy, in today's dollars, and, I'm not judging those people that are all willing to throw their hat in the arena. I appreciate that. But $1 million to most Roane Countyans is a lot of money. And to think that you would spend $1 million in mailers and flyers and TV commercials, most of my 70-year-old retirees can't imagine that. Most of my new parents who are working just to keep diapers on the kids and food in their mouth can't imagine that. And so who is it that's commonplace to? It's the political elitist. And I think most of us, including me, are up to their nose holes with political elitists. We're sick of it. And, I think it's interesting. Donald Trump's worth what, $4 billion or $5 billion or $10 billion, it depends. I'm sure he's losing money in what he's doing. But he can still relate to average people to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. Much better than most of these two-bit politicians who have never, the Nancy Pelosi's of this world, or the Mitch McConnells, who have, both parties, just to be fair, have never really, they're not accomplished at anything other than getting votes and raising money. And we have that same thing in the state. We have lots of people that they're unaccomplished people, unread people, unthinking people that have gotten themselves in office in county commissions and school boards and state houses and senates, that they fully rely on the governor telling them what to do or a lobbyist telling them what to do, are scared to death to sit in a room full of people who are pissed off because they can't afford to buy groceries, and avoid that like the plague. Mm-hmm. But they'll go have the $500 or $1,000 a plate dinners, and with that upper crust of people, they're comfortable there while they have their armed security around them. And they want to put up pop-up gun-free zones so that Steve or Monty can't carry their Glock just to protect their wife and kids. Lord, I could go on and on about that.
It would help Covenant School quite a bit. I wish we had more time, but, Monty, I do want to thank you for your time today. We are at the end here, so, tell everyone how they can follow you outside this show. Do you do social media? You're not running for re-election, so they can't give us your campaign, but you're going to endorse somebody probably for your seat, so how will we know?
Yeah, well, probably won't endorse anybody. I'm going to let them earn that. But the folks that do, just as a word to them, they're going to get some hard questions from me about what they would and wouldn't do. So I hope whomever's running for State House District 32 puts their big boy britches on, because they're going to get some questions. Okay. They're not going to get any endorsements. On Twitter, I am Monty Fritts 1032, and we're somewhat active there. I don't have a big presence on anything. And Facebook, just Monty Fritts. You find me on Facebook at Monty Fritts. And
I think I did just see you recently, maybe even this week, leading up to this show, throwing in saying, hey, you Republicans from Knox County and Williamson County, quit sniping at each other and get to work.
Yeah. We've done some of that, and I'm okay with taking them on. I didn't come to Nashville to get any friends. I've made a few, but friendship, real friendship, endures differing opinions. It's something else when you have to think like the other person all the time. And so we've got a June 6th. I'm going to do like a big outdoor town hall, and we're going to talk about that. You'll probably have Jody there, and we'll probably have Todd there, maybe some other. I know Lowell's coming, Lowell Russell. He and I share Loudoun County, and probably one of the hardest working people in the General Assembly, Lowell is. And then we've got a big thing in Loudoun County on the 30th. So I'm going to do lots of public things. We were in Washington County with my friend Bud Halsey recently.
We'll have to come up with a name for you guys, like the not the Expendables, but something like the Outsiders or the Rebels or the Volunteers, because you are a caucus of patriotic, Christian, I believe, hardworking people that are willing to read the bottom line, and not the ones that you talk about that would end up, kissing butt to the leadership in order to maintain their committee seat to be able to go on those dinners or make those friends, as you said. So there really is, unfortunately.
Well, I've got a name for you, and it's not about us. It's God, Guns, and Guts. Because if first, we better reacquire the proper posture before Almighty God, the one that's mentioned in our Constitution. And we better do that as government. And that means staying within the bounds of the Constitution and staying within reasonable bounds of budget. And it means being stalwart on our defense of God's institutions of life and marriage and taking care of one another. We shouldn't be offering incentives for people not to work, but we ought to make sure that we don't have widows and orphans that are hurting too, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've probably got some room to move on that as Republicans. We stop giving so much corporate welfare. It might just be that the average Tennessean in Shelby County or Roane County or Sullivan County might have it a little bit better.
In environmentalism. But on that note, which is optimistic, I'm going to thank you again. Hang on, everybody. I will be right back.
Thank you, brother. Yes, sir, you too.
Sing a song about the heartland, the only place I feel at home. Sing about the way a good man works until the daylight's gone.
It's the end of the show, so it's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. That's how we grow and keep this content free for you. That's it for this episode. Thank you, Monty Fritts, for being willing to not separate church from state and making sure you can look back on this time and think you couldn't have done more to protect our children and grandchildren's future like you wanted. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com. See you next time. Happy Memorial Day. Peace in our time, and definitely glory to God.
I've been dreaming of a wild, wild place, walking where the pine trees dance.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.